ሰላም ሰላም የዩቲዩብ ቤተሰቦች እንዴት ናችሁ? ሁሉ ሰላም ነው? እኔ ደህና ነኝ፣ እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን። ዌልካም ቱ አወር ዩቲዩብ ቻናል። ቱዴይ ዊል ፕሮሲድ ፎር about engineering mechanics. Basically, engineering mechanics. We'll proceed to engineering mechanics. Okay. So, what about engineering mechanics here? Engineering. Okay. Engineering all about statics. Okay. Statics and what? Statics and dynamics. So engineering mechanics is one of the profession which deals about the particles and the rigid bodies. It is all about particles and rigid bodies. Okay, particles. Okay, here particles and rigid bodies. Particles and rigid bodies. እንግዲህ ፓርቲክል እና ሪጅድ በዲ ብለን ስናወራ ደግሞ particles are just subsets in rigid bodies. Okay, rigid bodies are just made from particles or some negligible amount of dimensions or some negligible amount of dimensions that's called particles. እንግዲህ ፓርቲክሎች በጣም ኔግሊጂብል የሆነ ወይም በጣም ትንሽ የሆነ ሜቢ በሰው ልጅ እይታ በማይታዩ መልኩ ያላቸው ዳይሜንሽን ያላቸው ናቸው. To some extent in magnification they will be seen, and that's called particles. And a tiny particles and the collection of a tiny particles just forms about rigid bodies. So this is the startups or the makeups for mechanics, dynamics. Okay, dynamics. So by having these basic concepts or basic concepts for engineering mechanics, we'll see about statics and dynamics. These are basic two branches of mechanics, dynamics. Okay, what statics is, what dynamics is. Dynamics is all about the moving particles. Okay, moving particles. These are objects are in motion. Okay, objects are motion or changing and their accelerations. What about statics? Statics are maybe they are in state of rest or in state of motion. In state of rest or in state of motion. እንግዲህ ፓርቲክሎቹ ወይም ኦብጀክቶቹ ስቴት ኦፍ ሬስት ላይ ከሆኑ ወይም ስቴት ኦፍ ረስት ስራ ከመስራት የተቆጠቡ ወይም ዝም ብሎ የተቀመጡ ፎርስ አክሽን የሌላቸው ከሆኑ እነዚህ ምንድናቸው? ስቴት ኦፍ ረስት እንላለን። አርፈው ያሉ ማለት ነው። አርፈው ያሉ. but there may be a state of motion also. In motion እንቅስቃሴ ላይ ያሉ ሊሆኑ ይችላሉ። So if they are in motion, this is called kinematics, whereas if they are in rest, they are called statics. We will see these things in basic kinetics. So we will see these basics in statics category. The dynamics, as I told you, dynamics, the objects are in motion or accelerating in motion, or they are changing their acceleration. This acceleration means rate of change of displacement or their position by time. Okay, by time. This is basic category in dynamics. So this is all about the basic makeups of any object in this world. Kinetics is the study of motion without considering what its forces, what causing it. That's called kinematics. That's called kinematics. But kinetics are deals about relation between what the action of force and the resulting motions. Here in this statics it comes kinetics and kinematics. As definition wise, statics is maybe objects are in rest or objects are in motion. This is a basic category for statics. Whereas in dynamics what ምንድን ነበር ያልኳችሁ? Objects in motion ብያችኋለሁ, or state of action of the force and their resulting effect on the object. Okay, on the object. እንግዲህ የሆነ ኦብጀክት ላይ ፎርስ አክሽን በሚሆንበት ጊዜ ሪዛልቲንግ ኢፌክት አለው ማለት ነው። ሜቢ ይህን መኪና ብትገፉት, ሜቢ ኮንሲደር ዚስ ዋን፣ ይህን መኪና ብትገፉት consider this one as a car. If some action force exists, it starts to move. Okay, it starts to move. This movement of the car is the result from what? The action of the force. And this is a basic concept about dynamics. Dynamics is all about some action of the resultant force or a specific object and the resulting effect. Resulted from action of the force. So this is basic working way for dynamics. When we are dealing about the rigid body or rigid bodies of the mechanics, we'll see the basic concepts of which are included in the rigid bodies of mechanics. Rigid bodies of mechanics. These are basically what we call it space. This is a space which occupies particles and rigid bodies, and we will see about also matter. What is matter? What is mass, space. These are the basic rigid body principle particles. This space. What is space? What's space here? What's space? What's mass? What's mass here? I will write here. What's space? What's mass? What's mass? What's force? What's force? So these things are the basic rigid body particles which should be considered in mechanics. Okay. There is also another event event management criteria that's called time. Time. What is it dealing about? What is space here? Space is some boundary or a region that is occupied by a specific object. Okay, some region. Okay, region that's occupied by what? A specific object. Occupied by specific object. A specific object. A specific object. በአንድ በተወሰነ ኦብጀክት በአንድ በተወሰነ ማተር ወይም ነገር የተያዘ ሪጅን ወይም ቦታ ይህ ምን ይባላል? ስፔስ እንለዋለን ማለት ነው። ስፔስ እንላለን። this is basic for rigid bodies on mechanics. what about mass? what is mass? ማስ ወይም ክብደት ብለን በተለምዶ የምናውቀው ማለት ነው። ማስ ምንድነው? how do you explain about mass? okay, what is mass? Mass, just it's a quantity, right? It's a quantity that's measured, right? How it's measured? How it's measured? Mass is basically the relative action of a load on another body. The relative action of force that's measured relative to another body. Okay, that is action. Okay, action, relatively measured. Relatively measured as per another object. Action. What is to mean action? just ክብደት የምንለው ማለት ነው። ክብደት የምንለው ስለዚህ የራሱ የሆነ ይዘት ሲኖረው ማለት ክብደት የሚኖረው that's action means የራሱ የሆነ ምን ሲኖረው ነው? ይዘት ወይም ቮሊዩም ሲኖረው ማለት ነው። that's ማስ የሚመጣው ምንድነው? የራሱ የሆነ ይዘት ሲኖረው የራሱ የሆነ ቮሊዩም ወይም ይዘት ሲኖረው ምን ይሆናል? relatively with another object. For example, consider this as a beam balance. Okay, maybe these are what you call it, balance. Consider this as a balance. Mass here is measured based on the mass of the object here. Okay, the mass of object just is the relativity with this one. Okay, relatively with this one. Relatively with the one standard measuring unit with some specific deviation. Okay, with some specific deviation. That's called mass ምንለው ማለት ነው። that's called mass ምንለው ማለት ነው። አክሽን ነው ወይም ጫና ነው። አንዱ ኦብጀክት ሌላ ኦብጀክት ላይ ያሳደረው ጫና ነው። የሚለካው ደግሞ ከሌላው አንፃር ማለት ነው። just mass ይዟል አንጻራዊ ሜዠርመንት ነው ማለት ነው። አንጻራዊ ሜዠርመንት ነው። ኦኬ what about force? What about force? What's force? How can you define force? Force. Who can define force for me? Okay, force. Okay, let's define it. What's force? Just push or pull. Okay, push. This object is push. Okay, let me push it. Let me push it. Okay, let me push it. That's called push. Okay, push or pull. Pull towards you. That's pull. But away from you. That's push. That's called basically force. It's called basically force. Force is a measurement that's called vector quantity. You can say vector quantity that's created by the push or pushing or pulling of an object. Mostly force is created by these two scenarios. Okay, that's exerted by one body to another body. That's also relative measurement. That's called basically force. When you define force, we need to consider about pull and push forces. That's pull and push forces. These are the basic sources to consider action of the forces as compression force and the tensile force. That's called. tensile and compression, okay? Compression force and tensile force. As tensile is mostly pull up force, whereas compression is mostly push force, inwards push, okay? Push, push. Let's push, push. Let's go, pull. That's it. That's it. So it's basically the main concepts about force is this one. These are the basic criteria for rigid bodies of mechanics. Rigid bodies of mechanics. What about time? What about time? ወይም ጊዜ የምንለው ማለት ነው። ጊዜ የምንለውም ወይም time ምንድን ነው? Just it is a duration of an event. What can we say? Duration, I can say. Duration of an event. Event ምንድን ነው? ክስተት ነው አይደለ? አዎ ክስተት። የክስተቱ ዱሬሽን ወይም ቆይታ ምን ይባላል? ታይም እንላለን። የክስተቱ የሁኔታው ቆይታ ምን ይባላል? ታይም እንላለን። there is some start at time and there is at end of time. Okay, there should be start and end because it is duration. For a duration means there is a start and there is end. This is a gap for a duration of time in terms of time. For example, 5 seconds we can say like this, 5 seconds, or 5 hours maybe we can say 5 hours for duration. Okay, to go from one town to another town, there is a time. Okay, there is a time duration. Or traveling from one town to another town, for example, what's the duration or what is the event here? The event is traveling. Okay, the event is traveling, whereas the duration is the time it takes to reach your destination. This is called basic criteria for mechanics of rigid bodies. These are the specific criteria, okay, to consider. Mass is there in rigid bodies, force is there, time is there, space is there. Space is there, just occupied space or a region that's occupied for a specific object. Mass, when you deal about mass, it is action of one body to another body which is relatively measured as per some standard measurement device or within some specific deviation, okay? Within some specific deviation.